prefer to do is to talk about the content, the quality of the content that we use to communicate with one another. And I'm really concerned about this because in all of the experience I've had, I have recognized that in a number of recent years that there are certain contradictions that have arisen which really we need to confront. One of them is that we live in a very interconnected world. We have the capacity to talk to one another. We have more opportunities to express ourselves than we've had at any time in human history, but actually, oddly enough, we are ill-informed. We find ourselves in a time when there is enormous capacity for democracy, for cooperation, and as we've heard, for sharing of knowledge, but there are massive problems about how we define the quality of the information that we are getting access to. And I think the question of the quality of information and the ethics of communication and the way that we use our ability to communicate now is fundamentally important to our future. We live in difficult times. There is austerity. There are dangers abroad. There is hate speech. There is terrorism. There are enormous problems facing communities. People are anxious about their future. And so we need access to information which is reliable. We need access to information that we can trust. We need access to information that will help us to participate in democracy. In a democracy, you take part in that democracy on the basis of informed choices. You make choices. This party, that party. This school, that school. This hospital, that hospital. This house, that house. And it's based upon knowledge that you are given. And the question is, if that knowledge is not, and that information is imperfect, then those choices you make will be difficult. So when I talk about ethics, and I've come to talk about ethics, I don't want to have it sort of seen in some sort of academic context, as a discussion among people, concerned intellectuals, about trying to understand the values of the society and communities in which we live. I want to sort of us to think about ethics in terms of the realities of how we live our lives today. Ethics matter because ethics, the problem, apart from the problem about this, the question of ethics is that ethics are not the responsibility of professionals, doctors, lawyers, journalists. All human beings are ethical animals. Society itself is based upon rules and codes that we have agreed in society. If you look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights or the European Convention on Human Rights, it's like a code of conduct for humanity. It outlines what is tolerable and what is intolerable. It outlines our aspirations as to how we should live. It's a sort of code of conduct for the community at large. So when I talk about ethics, I want to go on now to talk about ethics in journalism and why these are important. Because in journalists, there is a distinction that I want to draw attention to, which is the distinction that makes journalism different. The major point I want to make today is that ethical journalism is absolutely vital to the quality of information that we have. And there are 400-odd codes of conduct for journalists around the world. Most of these codes, actually, are in different, they come from different cultures, different countries, different regions, but actually they represent the same sort of values. Because most codes cover 5 basic ethical obligations of journalists. And this is what distinguishes journalism from free expression. First of all, truth. Tell the truth. Don't lie. Secondly, be independent. Don't be the spokesperson for the Minister of Information or any special interest group. Thirdly, be impartial. Recognize there are 2 sides to every story that needs to be told. Fourthly, show humanity. Be aware of the consequences of what you do, the images that you show, the words that you use. In this region, there was a terrible war not so long ago in which the media played a terrible part, using language which was designed to provoke hostility and dispute between peoples. And fifthly, and this is the most difficult for journalists, humility. It's the capacity to be accountable, to recognize that when you make mistakes, you have to correct them, to respond to the concerns of your audience. It's absolutely vital. Now, these basic values of journalism today are under terrible difficulties and threats. One of the reasons for that is because the industry itself is in great difficulty. There is less money to be made out of journalism today, and as a result of that, there's less money spent on journalistic investigation, less money spent on training, and so on and so forth. But we also live at a time when we have the internet, and we have the audience participating in the journalism that we are seeking to develop. The audience is no longer merely a group that journalists talk to and dictate to. Through the internet, we have an enormous capacity for exchange. But I want to draw a distinction between journalism and free expression. Journalism is not free expression. If you're working on the internet, you open up your computer, you press it on, you engage, that's free expression. You can say what you want. And this is one of the most liberating things, as we've heard, about modern society. But the fact of the matter is, when you're expressing yourself through the internet and social networks, you don't have to tell the truth. You don't have to be independent. You certainly don't have to be impartial. You don't have to show humanity. You can be as beastly as you want, because it's your right to free expression. And certainly you don't need to show humility. So this is one of the characteristics which I think makes the distinction between free expression and ethical journalism. In my view, we need to work out how we can transfer the values of journalism into the whole online communication space. That's not easy, but it's absolutely vital. And I have to say that we are seeing today a very dangerous development, which is the blurring of the difference between what is journalism and what is free expression. A few days ago, there was a terrible, awful event in Boston around the marathon. In the first 24 hours after that terrible event, an enormous number of lies were circulated. Some of those lies were circulated through bad journalism, a lack of verification of facts. Many of those lies were repeated by social networks, which were circulating information which was speculation and rumor without verification. In the process, hundreds of thousands of people were misinformed about the number of people who had been killed, about who was responsible. Many people whose picture was circulated suddenly found themselves accused by social networks of being part of the process of terrorism and so on. So we have a major problem when we live in an age when there is a rush to publish, when we all want to have access to immediate information and immediate news. This is a dangerous thing, so we have to work out how do we combat it. What I would like to, I'll conclude with this. I do believe that we can build a completely new culture of information which is based on ethics. But we can do that without being restrictive. We can do that without imposing laws which are designed to control speech and to control people's and to limit people's right to express themselves. But it's my view that unless we take time to reflect and recognize that ethical journalism and ethical communication requires thought and pause for reflection, that unless we challenge the culture of the rush to publish, immediacy as a demand, then I think we're going to be in serious trouble. I hope that introducing ethics into media literacy campaigns, developing a whole new understanding of the need to be responsible in the way that we communicate with one another, will actually make a serious contribution to changing how we see ourselves. It will make us more democratic, it'll make us more human, and actually, it'll make us more trustworthy. And it seems to me that, above all, makes ethics something worth fighting for in the future. Thank you very much.